Hey, DeRacers. So we're back again to talk to you today about some of the latest changes that took place this week on DeRace, specifically horse leveling brackets, because this is something that is definitely disrupting the way registration happens, but hopefully it's for the better. And we've already figured out that there's some new strategies to this, and we wanted to spend some time talking to you about that.
All right, so we're going to get started by understanding the new brackets that you see when you go to the races tab on derace.com. The first thing that you're going to notice is that the far left column has some new colors added to it. Why don't you go ahead and hover over what you see there and tell us what we're seeing with the different levels.
All right, so now there's going to be 3 different levels. The blue one, the blue star, that's going to be from levels 1 to 25. There is a purple one from 26 to 50, and then there is a yellow one like this that is for 51 and higher. Now, if you have only a handful of horses and you're trying to really accurately pick out your locations, on the top right-hand side over here where it says entry level all, you can switch this to a specific classification, and then you would see that these would exist. Now, our understanding... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's really important to understand too that these are for equipment races only.
Correct.
So you're not going to see this on any of the unequipped racing. So when you do set that entry level and have the filter, you're going to want to make sure that you actually kind of stay off to the side in understanding what races are going to list there. There's not going to be a ton. It's just going to be a couple of them at any given time.
Yep. And now our understanding, the reason why DeRace was doing this is that they want to create value for equipment. They want to motivate more equipment races because especially as we get jockeys, the game's going to get more and more complex. But the problem is that as we had a handful of horses that were significant point leaders, those level 80 horses were able to decimate anybody that attempted to race them below. And that ultimately led to less and less people showing up for equipment races. So this... it is a particular attempt at a solution to this one. So again, hopefully this works, but there's also a couple different shifts that originally it was 1, 2, and 3 Dirk, but now as you go to the higher tiers, it is now a multiplier effect. And
yeah,
that's right. Is it 1 times 2 times 3, or is it 3 and 5?
Yeah, so each level, again, using the stars that you see in that left side, if you see a single star lit up, you've got a 1x multiplier. It just means that you're in the lowest level bracket, and you're going to still be looking at 1, 2, and 3 Dirk races showing up. It's just like it was before. This is for people that are just getting started. Their horse is fairly brand new. You're still in discovery, and you want to be able to understand what they can do. You're not wanting to spend a ton of Dirk to do so. So it's still 1, 2, and 3. However, as soon as you go to the purple, which has 2 stars on it, you're now looking at a 2x multiplier. So you might see, it's a 1, 3, and 5, not 1, 2, 3. So 1, 3, 5. So on those purples that have 2 stars, you're going to see 3, 6, and 9 Dirk races. And then like you see here where it's gold and has the 3 stars, you're actually going to have 5, 10, and 15 Dirk races. So that one in particular is a 10 Dirk race.
Perfect. And then the other one is if you still will find these here, this is an open for all race. This is basically what happened before this change. And this will still be the 1, 2, 3 Dirkers in anybody, any level. Level 1 horse with equipment can go against a level 80 with equipment. And right now, you'll notice that those are the ones that are filling up the most. And we suspect it's just due to some confusion in people that are using like bots or ARM. If they did not change their maximum Dirk allocation, our system would not allow you to race that. Because, for example, my horse being a level 80, I would have to go 5, 10, or 15. So if I set my max Dirk to 3, it would be skipping all of the 5s or higher because it wasn't set up to be so.
Yeah, and to be clear, there's no concern about your horse getting into races. It's just that they're going to be getting into these, I guess we're calling them the open bracket, where it's 1 to 80 for equipment. So you're maxing out at the same 3 Dirk entry fee that you would have had before.
Yep. Now, with this, there's a lot of different elements that have changed in the game. Some of the things that I do like, I really, really like that they've raised the Dirk values. To be able to take a champion horse to race a 1 Dirk, to me, is still just a waste of time. Moving them into a 15 Dirk, as those start to fill up, it means that the horses that are leveled up to that grade are going to have opportunities of winning way more prizes per day, which I think is great. It's a motivational factor to get yourself up there. And then the other thing that's interesting about this is that the brand new Gen 1 horses that are coming out, or if there was a Gen Zeros that were unraced, that whole entire top 25 or the first 25 levels, you're going to be racing against very different horses. You're not going to see the same usual suspects. They might follow with you from the first bracket to the second to the third, but you're at least going to be going up against new horses, new competition. So a lot of the stats that we have, where we have thousands and thousands of data, it's because some of these top horses have raced 10,000 times. So as you're going into these smaller tiers, you are going up against very unique data sets of different horses, different capabilities, different averages. So a lot of the strategies have changed.
Yeah, and there's some protection to be had when you're in these lower level brackets. Like you said, you're not racing against the top horses out there, but you're also racing against those Gen 1s that people are just now discovering might actually be a champ. And so you may still, you're going to face just as stiff a competition. It's just that it's going to be from names you don't necessarily recognize.
Totally. So now with this said, we were doing some pencil math to get to level 25. So to get out of the first bracket, approximately, it only takes 450 to 500 races total. Now, if you were to do 10 races of every single track, to do just the old traditional, do 10 everywhere to get a sense of what your horse's capability is, just doing 10 alone is going to consume all level upgrade of the first bracket. So the questions that I have for you is, does this change your opinions on how you should discover horses, especially if you're trying to stay in low bracket to be safe while you're doing your discovery?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about what it takes to discover a horse, I know you and I have very different pathways to that. One thing that I'm recommending now is not necessarily that you do 10 on every track, right? We now have 42 different distances and surfaces as an option to get to know your horse. What I recommend people do now is a little bit of a hybrid. We can now run 5s, 10s, and 15s on every surface. And what I typically recommend people do is about 20 races on each, so that you can fully understand what your horse's capabilities are. Now, if you're going to run that, that means you've got 60 on dirt, 20 on 5s, 20 on 10s, 20 on 15s for a total of 60. And then you're going to run that same thing on synth and turf. So you're coming out of that at about 180 to 200 races, give or take, which means that out of that discovery, you're halfway through the phases, of the levels for the bracket number one, which means that you're probably at about a 15, 16, 17 level for your horse, which leaves you an option to start considering running equipment. We'll get to that in just a minute about whether or not you should. But I typically say people should do that model, because out of that, you can learn a couple of things. Do you have a surface preference? Does your horse have the capability to run on dirt? Or is it not going to be able to handle that? But also understanding whether or not they have a preference toward the 5s versus the 15s. But also throwing the 10 in there in the middle, because there are some horses where they just don't get going fast enough by the 5s, but they've run out of gas by the 15s, or they've just joined the pool of all these other horses that can also run 15s. So that data gets a little messed up. So those 10s are a really good indicator for me. Now you can pare that down and just do 5s and 10s. Or in your case, I think you recommend just doing the 5s.
Yeah. So I guess it also depends on the size of your stable and how patient you are. So for me, when I bring on a new foal, I don't mind taking its time because I'm focusing elsewhere. So I usually will set mine to 5 dirts, 5 synths, and 5 turfs, and just let them hit those when they hit them. Now, if that was the only horse that I had, I would probably do what you do and do 10s and 15s as well, because I want to speed up the process. But if I'm going for profitability, I'm definitely going to just do 5s. And then I'm going to run them enough until I see the linear regression model following suit, where dirts are slower than synth and synths are faster than turf. So it should be dirt's the slowest, and then synth, and then turf. If I've done enough data sets of those ones where I see the vertical alignment is in place, it gives me a decent sense that the data that I've collected on them is a good representation. It is definitely not factual, but from there, I think I can figure out what my surface preference is. And then once I think I know where my surface is, I then go to the 10s. But I don't do them on the surfaces that I don't think I'm going to like. That way I don't have to blow an additional amount on 2 different surfaces that might be a bust. If I find it's only turf, then I'm going to do tens on turfs, and then I'm going to do a comparison.
Yep.
Then the other thing about this is that I feel like the fives test, just doing that quickly, gives me a sense of knowledge of, is this a donkey? If it's just getting destroyed, every horse seems to show up somewhat on fives. So if I'm like a sub 22% podium rate, that horse is absolute trash. But if I'm around 25%, it means that maybe I could find where I need to send it somewhere with more discovery. But if I just do fives and the horse is coming out swinging with above 30% podium rate, it makes me feel really good that this horse has potential. So as I continue my discovery, especially knowing that within 500 races, I'm going to get pushed into a new bracket, I want to be very specific where I'm investing that time, because if I'm a better manager, that to me makes me think that I'm going to be able to maximize my profits where I'm competing against other people that are trying to discover their horse at the same time. And if they're scattershotting it, I'm going to take advantage of that as best as I can and try to reap as much profit.
Yeah, and I think that really is key when it comes to what we're now seeing with these new bracketing, right? Like having to consider the fact that you might want to run equipment toward the end of that 1 to 25 level range. If you're going to be running a horse maybe with equipment from 20 to 25, you can't afford to have run your entire discovery and blow past your level 25. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like 400 to 500 races will get you to that level 25.
Yep.
And so if you're doing 10, 20, shoot, if you do 10 on every track, you've done 420 races.
Yep.
Like you're already there. You've blown
Yep.
your way right out of level 1. And now you move up into a tier where you've got horses wearing equipment that might be a level 45 to 50. You're not going to be considering doing equipment most likely when you're a level 26, 27. So now you got thousands, well, at least 1,000 more races to get yourself out of that second tier and move out of the bracket where some of those horses are going to be crushing you again. So you've just lost an opportunity if you even want to take it.
Yep. So on that note, let's talk about what would be our recommended strategies, because I feel like this has shifted the game significantly. And if we do that initial discovery, your method or my method or whoever's watching their method, as soon as you do your baseline discovery and you have a sense, do I have a donkey? Do I have a mid-range horse? Do I have a champion? What would be the smart approach? So,
yeah, let's start with talking about what it would take to level up a donkey. Let's assume really early on that you've got a bad horse.
Okay, so in my mind, 100% of the purpose of a donkey is mission hunting, and then the second focus is with these brackets. It is to try to sneak out profit at the end of the bracket, because I would suspect at level 23 to 25 with equipment is the only window that a donkey has. So what I would do is, as soon as I realize I have a donkey, I would basically stop all discovery. If it's trash, it's trash. Just do missions and slow your bleed as much as you can. But then as soon as you get to like that 23 and you have good gear, I might recommend put that gear on and then ignore missions and target just the few tracks that you think it might do okay, and see if you could recover your investment for those first lead up races. But that's what I would try. What about you? What would you do for the first part?
Well, I think the question becomes like, how did you do your discovery, right? Like, how did you come to the understanding that you in fact have a donkey, right?
Okay.
Like when we think about your strategy, let's say you've done your fives and you're like, wow, I got nothing. Like there's not a single track that's good. I mean, your next thing you're going to be considering at that point, again, you might only be 50, 60, 70 races in.
Yep.
You have to decide at that point, where are you going to go next? Like, maybe you try running sprints, like let's see some twos and see if it can maybe get out the gate where it doesn't have to have any pace in the middle of the track. Instead, it's all about that acceleration out the get-go, and then the finish of the race. Maybe you got some capabilities there, so you run some twos. Now you're going to have to run maybe, I don't know, 30 to 50 to 70 more races again. So now let's say you still haven't discovered any twos. At this point, I don't know. Like for me, I have a hard time ever imagining putting equipment on a donkey. But let's say you do have some decent equipment, I could see doing it earlier than any other horse, right? Like you might only be 150 races in. Let's say that's a level 15, and at that point you go, shoot, let's try it. Let's go
Yep.
ahead and put some equipment on, and I don't know, maybe you run your 15s. We know that 15s are where the most number of horses all kind of come together, especially on turf where you don't need a lot of stamina. They all flatline in terms of their average pace. It gets more compact. So if you've got decent equipment, I could see running your donkey on maybe a long distance turf and just see if that speed increase or that stamina increase actually does push you over the edge and make you some money.
Okay. So then as soon as you hit the 25 bracket, what do you do with your donkeys then? Does a strategy change at all, or does it repeat itself and it just the same thing?
I think at that point you're now into what you said with mission hunting. I think you're purely going to be picking off races here and there. You probably turn your equipment back off because you just don't. In that
Yep.
next tier, you got to remember you're running 3s, 6s, and 9s for Dirk expenditure.
With
So
equipment. Yeah.
with equipment, so you're turning that equipment off because I can't imagine you're going to run a level 26 at a 3 Dirk leveled bracket race. Like you're going to go back to the one Dirk and maybe mission hunt.
Yep.
Now, keeping in mind that you might have only run, 5s, didn't discover anything, 2s didn't discover anything, and now maybe some long distance stuff may or may not have discovered anything with equipment. You're now going to be that level 26 and you're going to say, where do I run? I think the mission hunting is going to fill in the gaps naturally. So you're
Mhm.
just going to see that it picks up an 11 here and a 7 there and a 6 there and fills in some of the picture. And you may discover that their sweet spot was somewhere right in the middle. It was a synth 9, and that was the only thing they could run. And you just never saw it in discovery. It's like, great. Now you can reassess in the latter portion of the middle tier, or middle bracket. Do you actually have the capabilities to run with equipment on the synth 9? And at that point, now I'm going naked races, unequipped races on a one Dirk to continue discovery and sugar harvesting. But at the same time, I might actually consider running maybe 3s equipped on that synth 9 because it's the only thing where I can make some money.
Okay. Yeah. In my opinion, what I would be doing is as soon as I know I have a trash horse, the only thing I am doing is one Dirk naked races going after missions, because even if I fail to get all of my daily missions and I miss out on my weekly and I miss out on my monthly bonus, I'm okay with that, because
Yeah.
not only does that sugar bonus, that sugar bonus comes with an XP bonus. And so if you get that XP bonus, you're just going to expedite your donkey to go to the next tier. And if I have trash, I'm literally just trying to pick the cheapest route to gather what I can. And that's what I'm doing. The moment I get into a 50 tier with a donkey, it is permanently a one Dirk mission hunting horse. And that's all it is to me.
That's what I was going to ask next. And I think it's something like 1,700, 1,800 races with a donkey before you're ever past that level 50. So you're talking about, spending at least probably 1,800 plus Dirk.
Yeah.
Who knows what you're making in return? Probably something very small. Let's even say you make half. You're still down 1,000 Dirk on that
Yeah.
horse. Yeah, you're not going into that third bracket and going, woohoo, this is my time to shine. Like
Nope.
it's just not going to happen. So I think you're going to continue to do the same thing if you even want to level it up. This
Yep.
may take forever because you may be mission hunting just one race a week, couple races a week. It might not be much of anything. And that's really, I mean, ultimately going to sift out all the donkeys. They'll just stop getting raced
Yep.
over
True.
time, and then there'll be a natural rising of the best to the top as you get to level 51 plus.
Okay. So now switching to, let's go with the mid range, because I feel like the mid range
Okay.
is the area that has the most strategy and also the most horses. So
I'd say the most chaos, but yeah.
oh, absolutely. All right. So taking a horse that is not trash, and like I would say, like if I did discovery, a mid range horse is a horse that is averaging around 25% podium rate. Now that's not great, but that just means to me that you'll be able to find pockets of where this horse can race. So you have to start being a smarter manager. There is a path to profitability, but you need to be sharp with where you're looking.
Yep.
I would still do my fives. I would still first pick my preference. But now what you suggested previously, this is where I would implement your strategy, where I would start with the fives, and then I would try some twos if it's showing signs of sprinting, and I would start to try to hone in on a very, very specific pocket. There's the word. Because we know that a mid-range horse is not going to succeed on 2-14. It might be 2-4 or 4-6, and there's going to be a small range. So rather than test random areas, the moment I think I find where they're going to hone in, that's where I'm going to be spending the bulk of my time with that horse.
So now with a mid-level horse, like you're not going to know it's a mid-level horse till you've done 100 races or so, right? At a bare minimum. And for my strategy, it's a little higher than that. It's about 180 races or so. But essentially, you're coming into the middle of that first bracket, recognizing where your horse is, whether it's that donkey or it's now a mid-level horse. And we know, and the way I typically describe it is not so much the winning percentage or podium percentage, but I tend to look at it as where they can run and make profit, and counting the total number of tracks. I'll typically tell people that if you've got a horse that can run and make money on more than 6 tracks, you've got a champ. If it's 3 to 6, you probably got a mid-level horse, and if it's less than 2, 1, or 0, you've probably basically got a donkey who's only going to pick off a race here and there. So this mid-level horse, again, and for me, is you've got 3 to 5 tracks. The only way you're truly going to know that in the first level is if you've run enough variance on surface or distances to be able to pick out if they have a preference on maybe only one surface or 2, not all 3. And then, like you said, zeroing in on short versus long, which is why I like having the 5, 10, 15 as a baseline. I can now swing myself one direction. If I want to go 2 through 5, or if I want to go 10 through 15, or sit right in the middle and go 5 to 15, I've created that natural range where I may then try to play with some equipped races for a mid-level horse.
All right, so one of my mid-levels I would was Long Dong, ID 2922, if you guys wanted to look up the stats of it. But Long Dong shows up on 2s and 3s of all 3 surfaces. That's where he likes to run. So I basically will pin him to that, and then I'll just do missions randomly. And so once I have that, I continue my discovery still via missions. But what I would be looking for in what I'm going to start doing now is pinning down the equipment. These are the horses that I would put the equipment on the most, because if it's a mid-range horse and you know that you have a sprinter, for example, this is where I'm going to very specifically put focus and speed type gear, attack the 2s and 3s, and I'll probably do sub 6 of a bracket. So I might start at level 19 to 25 to really pin on those, or do the same thing as soon as I get to the second tier bracket.
Yep.
So to me, that's the the smart play is to put equipment on these types of horses. And so once you find their pocket, that's when I'd shift it over. And again, hope for the profitability. But
all right, so as you move up into that second level and into the upper level, let's say that let's jump ahead. We know that you're probably going to be running equipped races, maybe in the lower, maybe the 3s and 6s, and not necessarily the 9s. It kind of depends on how good your horse is, and how good your equipment is, to be honest. But let's move into the 51 to 80 for that mid-range horse. You find yourself finally tipping over into the 51s. What are you doing?
Straight to naked. Like, if I have a mid-range horse, it's not going to compete with the champs. It's never going to. So I would wait until I probably get to level 70, because then I would then very much know that, like, a mid-range horse is usually really good at their very small spot. So I think that you have to do is you have to wait till you can evolve to that position. So for that mid-range sprinter, I would wait till I'm a 70, and I would go full tilt on my speed and focus. And I think I would pick them off from the champions, because I would be in my niche location with gear that's designed specifically for that horse. And that's where they retire. They'll stay there forever. But that 50 to 70 road is going to be a long, arduous one, because you have the most amount of races. So it's going to be setting them to naked races, using arm, just repeat, and try to maximize your XP, lick your wounds on your way. But then once you get to the top, that's when I think you could dial it in.
All right, so then talking about leveling up a champion horse, like again, it takes some time to figure out you have a champion, but
Mhm.
you may have a horse that right out the gate can run on 4, 5, 6 uh, more tracks really consistently with really good averages, very good ability on multiple surfaces and distances, and you're feeling excited, right? Like
Yeah.
we could fast forward and look at the final level and go, yeah, you're going to put the best equipment on your champion. We know that, etc. But what are you doing in that first kind of bracket to level up a champ?
For me, this is an easy one. If you have a champion, and you know when you have a champion, like the C word was a champion from the get go, runner everywhere, always naked, always. And the reason why I would do that is the champions I would run naked all the way to 70 is for the reason that if you genuinely have one of the best horses in the game, you need to make sure that you understand how to compete against the other best horses. And this might change as we get more data filtering, but right now the concern that I have is if you start with a, let's say, 100 speed boost on a champion, and then you eventually go to a 300 speed boost, and then eventually a 500, and then a 600, and then you finally get to 1,000. When you do a report and you look at what is your average times on that horse with equipment, all of those hundreds, 200s, 300s, 400s are going to pull your averages down. So then if you're trying to figure out like, hey, which horse do I want to compete against this other champion? Well, the horse that you've had data on, that you've had weakened speed boosts, you're going to have an incorrect perception of what this horse can
Mm-hmm.
do. So if I have a champion, I'm going to want to run it naked so it stays perfectly pure. And then I'm going to put all the concentration at the time because I'm going to know this is how I need to dial it in. And then once I dial it in, I'm going to see really clean data sets of going, okay, does it compete at the championship level the way that I want to? And I know very, very clearly that the data that I'm looking at is accurate to this horse. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if we get to a point where we could start to filter out and say, I only want to look at equipment from level 65 and up, then that might change things because I could then drop out all of the data that might be lower my averages. But as you can see from just this, it gets really complex. And so if you start adding layers of complexity to your own horses and your own stables data, it's going to make it hard to compete. But if you're just casually playing and you're just trying to win money when you can, you probably don't care. But for people that want to compete at the team levels, that would be my best advice.
The other thing I would say is that there's two things for me. One is what you just said. It's about data cleanliness, right? Like being able to understand what it does later, knowing that once you're ready to go, you can do it in the upper tier and it's going to have the best of the best gear. The other part of this is actually the fact that you may actually be opening yourself up to additional competition by putting equipment on a champ too early. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
explain why. Like what we just suggested you do with those donkeys, right, was to put the best gear you could at like a level 15 plus. Now, let's say you decide to throw your champ into that same race with equipment. That donkey is actually now closer to you. What if they have slightly better equipment? That donkey may have just put itself into the running against your great horse. So for me, I'm going to look at that and say, if you know in the first bracket, the first level bracket, that your horse can run unequipped and make you money, why would you change that model? There's no price difference in terms
Yep.
of the Dirk entry fee. There's zero reason to do it. Now, once you get into the second bracket, there may be, and this is where it kind of depends on how well you got to know your horse in that first bracket for me. That
Mm-hmm.
champ, as it moves into the 26 to 50 range, is going to potentially, probably toward the end of that bracket, be able to clean house with horses that people are playing with, still trying to understand. Maybe they don't have as good of equipment, but from that probably 40 to 50 range, you could probably have your champ actually run data. Now, again, once you move beyond 50, you're probably going to want to wait again till you're maybe 70 plus
Mm-hmm.
before you put it back on. So it's going to be kind of an up and down as you go. But if you have that champ, that they can run naked races and make you cash. Like if that's the case, you have to be incentivized to go and try to spend 3, 6, 9 or 5, 10, 15 in that ladder bracket. And so you either know you have the best of the best, or you need to be careful.
Yep. Good points. All right. So now going to the final thoughts on this one. This is a new feature. There was obviously a small problem that with the imbalance of levels. This problem might resolve itself in the course of months when we have more and more horses and the market could be more saturated with more. So I'm not 100% convinced that this feature is going to stay the same. If in 2 months, if we watch this video, it probably will look different. So with that, as is, what types of things do you think should be taken into consideration going forward?
Well, I think the one thing that we know for sure is that it's going to take some time for people to start shifting over to this new idea, right? You've basically, or DeRace has basically introduced the fact that now every horse has to consider from a Dirk entry standpoint a 1, 2, 3, a 3, 6, 9, or a 5, 10, 15. You've just got multiple entry points for cost. And with each of those, you have to know that there's enough horses getting into the races to be able to fill said race, right?
Yep.
And that's not happening right now. It's going to take some time for people to realize that they need to change their bot or change their expectation on what it's going to cost to enter a horse into a race. They're also going to have to start paying attention to whether or not their horse is actually broken past into a new bracket. And these are all things that it just takes time to recognize when you look at what your stable is filled with, what you have and where they should run, right?
Yep.
It was already hard enough. You had to pick out which surface and distance and how much you wanted to spend. Now you got to think about bracketing and whether or not you want to go into multiplier races and things like that. It's just a whole nother thing that you have to educate yourself on. And that's partly why we're doing this video.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The things that I would say is like, if we rewind back a little bit ago, I think it was a month and a half ago, where DeRace reduced the cooldown, reduced the registration time, and we were able to crank out races. That was wonderful. But back then, we all were much lower levels. We didn't have this problem. So I think that that was the right play at the time. But now with these limitations, we are going back to a world where races are not filling the way that they used to. So in my honest opinion, as much as I loved it historically, I think I would make the argument right now that horse cooldowns need to be extended. And then the other thing is that you need to extend the race registration again and reduce the supply of it. Because what I'm personally finding is that there are maybe 2 or 3 level 51 to 80 races, which I would love to go into, or any of my horses, wherever they fall in the brackets. I want to go into the equipment ones when it's relevant. But if there's 2 or 3 of them, I have to guess which one is going to be the one that fills. And if it's none of them, I have to go elsewhere. And I think as long as that happens, this is the problem that needs to be resolved. And I think it's all about supply and demand. You reduce the supply, and then people are going to need to be demanding of it. If I can only race my champion twice an hour, I'm not going to put it in 1 Dirk races. Yep. If those 10 Dirk and 15 Dirk races are going to fill, I will go into 2 of those per hour. And yep. I think as you adjust that, you're going to see people start to shift. And then I think you're going to get a natural spreading of the game. But yep. with too many races and right now, I think that's the thing that needs to get dialed or slightly adjusted. And then this might work really well.
Yeah, and I would caution as well that it can go the other direction, right? It can actually get to the point where if you increase the registration time and you decrease or excuse me, increase the cooldown, so decrease the number of races that you can get into in any given hour, you can actually have the opposite effect where you end up saying, well, that race, you know, let's say a 10 Dirk or a 15 Dirk upper bracket race only shows up once every 4 hours. Yep. Now I'm, as a manager, I'm going, well, shoot, wait, hold on a minute. I'm going to go back to the naked races and just run the 3 Dirkers because they'll fill more often, even though I might only get into them 2 or 3 times an hour. So it has to be this balance, right? You have to have enough of them showing up that you want to go into while also not having so few or so many that you actually can just pump them out and get into a race every 6 to 10 minutes. And you know, obviously it's a give and take. And like you said, supply and demand is going to be the key here. And
I think a major takeaway too. So to everybody that's watching, we all got to recognize that we all contribute to this as well. When you don't see, or if I don't see level 15 dirt races filling, and I switch arm to say I don't want to even chance it, I'm hurting the community effort. So if you're out there and you like the idea of higher ticket value races, then you need to enter them, because if you stop, other people will stop, and then it goes away. So if we want something, we have to commit to it. And using bots, ARM, etc., yeah, you'll miss a couple races a day, but you're racing around the clock. So I think it's important that we all recognize that with this shift, we need to step up, play the dirt. Let's throw down.
Yeah, and ARM already does it. You can level up just by simply saying that you want to run equipped races and you're willing to spend up to 15 dirt. Like if you just do that, you're guaranteed to be getting into those bracketed races as they appear, because they are the high value ones and they're going to throw you in. They're going to become available. And until this game has enough horses running consistently, that we get back to the days of it filling within a few seconds, that's going to take a while. There's enough races out there that you can still pick and choose which one you want to get to if you're doing it manually. But like you said, Vamp, like we need to be able to see more people getting into these races. And that means manual users need to pick the high dirt ones if you want to see that stick around.
Yep, absolutely. And make sure you guys update your bots out there. If you haven't adjusted your dirt values, there's a reason why you're not racing. It's because that all shifted.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that covered a lot. I mean, I think the brackets is a really fascinating thing. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with it, a lot of chaos that's created by it, a lot of protections that are afforded by it. And we're going to see a lot of cool things come out of people in the community doing stuff with the levels and the bracketing. But for now, just make sure you're understanding what you can do with levels and take advantage where you can.